Today on Northern Revolutions, I'm going to talk about 90s records again, but not OG pressings, modern ones. So stay tuned. Hey, Vinyl community, welcome to Northern Revolutions. I'm Rob. Welcome back if you're returning. Welcome if you're new. Today I'm kind of doing a follow-up video to the video that I did yesterday, which was a video where I showed some of my favorite OG 90s records. So albums from the 90s that my copies were actually pressed in the 90s. So today's kind of like a part two to that. And today I'm going to be looking at some of my favorite albums from the 90s, but modern pressings. So either they're reissues or they're vinyl issues because the originals were never issued on vinyl back in the 90s. So let's have a look. I'm going to start with my first one here, which was a grail of mine for a long time. This is Lisa Loeb, Tales. This was her debut record. From 1990, I don't know, 2, I think. I'll double check that. The Reader's Digest version of this is Lisa became the first unsigned artist to top the Billboard charts with her song Stay. She was unsigned. It was in the film Reality Bites. Because she was friends with Ethan Hawke, and because it was at the credits in that movie, it got some radio airplay and consequently made it to #1. I have wanted this album on vinyl forever. It was issued in the 90s, very hard to find. This actually just came out earlier this year. This is a very limited Japanese pressing on this weird sort of clear and pink splatter vinyl. I jumped on it the minute that it was released, and even these now are getting obscenely expensive for a record that's only been out 8 or 9 months. But I don't know that I'll ever have an OG, but at least I can enjoy this album on vinyl. I think it's a fantastic 90s record. Next on my list is some Canadian content. Not on purpose, but one of the greatest country albums ever, Shania Twain's The Woman in Me. This came out in, I think, 1995, I think, 4, something like that. It's what everyone considers her first album because it was, sort of the one that broke her career. She did have an album before this that went nowhere, but this was the first one that was produced by Mutt Lange. And then she would go on, obviously, to superstardom with this, and then the follow-up, Come On Over. I don't actually have Come On Over on vinyl. It is hard to find nowadays. My wife has a copy of it, but we don't share record collections. So anyway, this is the recent anniversary edition. You can see it's kind of got like a silver embossed cover on it. I'm not a huge country fan, but I mean, this was 90s gold on here. Any Man of Mine, Whose Bed Have Your Boots Been Under, If You're Not In Here for Love, I'm Out of Here, The Woman in Me, Is There Life After Love? I mean, all of those were solid radio hits, even on the pop radio charts. So, Shania Twain, The Woman in Me. Another fantastic Canadian band, which did have some success in the United States. This is the Crash Test Dummies, who are actually now based in New York City, fronted by Brad Roberts. Everyone would recognize him the minute they hear his voice. He has a very, very deep baritone voice. This is the album, The Ghosts That Haunt Me, which originally came out in 1991. The song off of here that was the big hit was called Superman's Song. On their follow-up album, which was called God Shuffled His Feet, is the song Mm-mm, which was their huge radio hit, and it was even a hit in the US. But this is the album before that, and it's a great record. I remember all the time the videos for Superman's Song, particularly playing on Much Music. So I don't know if this was ever issued on vinyl back in the day. I highly doubt it. I think it was probably CD only. So this was done on vinyl a couple years ago. So the Crash Test Dummies, The Ghosts That Haunt Me. This is an outstanding 90s album that I have seen many people in the vinyl community show. Blind Melon's self-titled release. This is actually the music on vinyl pressing. It's a sort of yellow, black, marbled vinyl. It's a limited edition. I don't know how many there are, but this is number 1185. There's a black vinyl version as well. I know some people kind of harp on the music on vinyl for not being great sound quality. I'm not an audiophile. To me, this sounds pretty good. I did a video ages ago when I first started on YouTube about albums that I bought for a single song, and this was one of them. I bought it obviously for No Rain, but it's an album that I quite enjoy start to finish now. I think I only remember No Rain from back in the day when it first came out, and everyone remembers the B video. I don't know that I remember anything else from this album back then, but it's an album that I listen to pretty regularly now. So, Blind Melon. Up next is a record I'm ashamed to say that I just picked up. It is a absolutely phenomenal 90s rock and roll record. I've heard it many times. I just haven't owned it until now. And that's the Black Crowes Shake Your Money Maker. From 1990, I believe. An absolutely stellar album. Twice as Hard, Jealous Again, Hard to Handle, She Talks to Angels. I mean, holy crap. Those are some damn good hits on here. This album is absolutely stellar, start to finish. And can't believe it took me this long to get a copy. I don't know if it was pressed on vinyl back in the day, but this is the 30th anniversary remaster, and it sounds fantastic. Pretty sure I've shown this one before. I mentioned in yesterday's video talking about my OG pressings that I never understood the Brit pop war, you know, Blur versus Oasis. I was a solidly Oasis fan, always have been. They're always the better of the two bands. But to me, they're rock and roll and Blur is pop, so I don't quite get why Oasis is labeled as Brit pop. But anyway, that said, while I love Oasis and one of my probably top 5 bands of all time, I do still like a little bit of Blur. Parklife. I had this on CD back in the 90s. In yesterday's video, I mentioned that the girl that I dated in high school was a huge U2 fan, also a huge Blur fan, and she introduced me to this band, and I remember the song Parklife, hearing that all the time, and End of a Century, and Girls and Boys. So I eventually bought this CD back in the day and listened to it a lot. Just got this on vinyl earlier this year. It's one of these I doubt it was put out on vinyl back in the 90s, but this is obviously a modern within the last, I think this came out 2 or 3 years ago. So Blur's Parklife. I also have The Great Escape by Blur, which I think is also another great record. It's the one that has Country House on it. But out of all the Blur records, this one was my favorite. So, what an iconic cover too. I mean, it's pretty recognizable from back in the day. Just 2 more. I'm not going to say anything about this other than I've shown this before. This is my guilty musical pleasure. I take no shame in admitting openly that I love the Spice Girls. 1996. Tell me what you want, what you really, really want. And last but not least, for me, I think this was one of those absolutely landmark albums of the decade. I think for me, the biggest album of the 90s was What's the Story, Morning Glory by Oasis. But the other one that I think of inherently when I think of the 90s is the Smashing Pumpkins' Melancholy and Infinite Sadness. This is the 4 LP box that came out earlier this year. There is a 3 LP version from, I think, 2015, both of which are stupid expensive. I paid a lot of money for this, but not nearly what they're going for online these days. Glad that I have this record. There are some songs in here that, for me, just automatically transport me back to, 1994 or 5, or, whenever I was listening to this a lot. There you go, folks. There's sort of the follow-up to my OG 90s with my modern pressing of 90s records. Just a sampling of some of the ones that I have that are favorites that are in constant rotation. So I hope you enjoyed that. Thank you very much for watching. Catch you on the flip side.